So, welcome everyone. This is Shuvankar Sen. I'm the convener of GJEPC SEZ committee. And today we all want to welcome you for a very, very special session. We have with us Mr. Nirav Jogani, a very, very very good well-wisher, a very, very close friend of our jewelry fraternity. He has been working very closely with us on various issues related to accounting, labor laws, and various other aspects that we at the jewelry industry are facing with. Before we begin, I would just like to have a very brief profile shared with all of you. Mr. Nirav Jogani is a chartered accountant with more than 25 years of experience. He doesn't look so old, but he has been very, very, actively involved with various aspects of the chartered accountant fraternity. He's currently the vice chairman of the RSM Astute Consulting Private Limited, a leading accounting consulting company in India with offices in 12 major cities of India, including Surat, Ahmedabad, and Mumbai. So you can very well understand that the hub of jewelry manufacturing he has been very, very closely working with. With a strong research and advisory team, RSM and Nirav are experts in the field of taxation, risk management, labor and corporate laws, technology, and various other subjects related to the changing scenario. And at the forefront of guiding the industry during these times of crisis, he's been working closely with a lot of companies in our industry. And we hope that with his guidance and with his wisdom, we all can get a direction. So today's subject that we would like to basically discuss upon is that in this COVID scenario, we all know that things are changing very fast. There are a lot of laws, a lot of regulations that are being brought about. And in today's day and time, growth is important for an organization, but it has to be sustainable growth, growth of not only a few individuals, but all stakeholders. It is a partnership situation. And with that thought in mind, in this whole last 1 year, the government has brought about various changes in the labor laws. There is the OSH bill, which is basically about occupational safety, health, and working condition of the various workers in our factory. There is a social security bill that has been introduced. There is an industrial relations bill that has been introduced. And also there is like a code of law that has been brought about, guiding people, and there are certain things that were already there, but along with that, new practices are being brought about. And I think today we all would like to learn and understand from Mr. Nirav that what is it that we at the jewelry industry would you think need to be very careful about, need to be aware about, and be compliant, and make our industry proud and grow the country with everyone in mind. So welcome, Mr. Nirav. And now we will hand over to you. I think there's some presentation that you have been, you would be presenting with everything in mind, because I think you know the industry so well. So I'll hand over the presentation to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sen. Thank you for the generous introduction. A very warm good evening to all of you, all the participants to this very important session on the new labor codes. I take this opportunity to thank the Gems and Jewelry Export Promotion Council for organizing a series of such very informative sessions for the members, very, very active always. Thank you, Rashmi ji, also for the kind coordination for the session. So with everyone's kind permission, I'll just share my screen so that we can start going. It is a very, very detailed subject, and I'll try to give as much justice as I can in the limited time that we have. Yes. So I'll be covering all the new 4 labor codes as they are called, and then also give the how and from when they have become applicable. So the first to go on
Nirav ji, I think for the viewers, we should inform them that we have the presentation, which will be for 30 to 40 minutes. Yes. And the last 10-15 minutes, we will take questions. People who would like to question can please write it on their chat box, and we will be taking the questions accordingly.
Absolutely. Thank you. So the first to go off the block was the code on wages, which was passed by the parliament in August 2019 and also got the approval, the assent of the president on 8th of August. However, the rules and the applicable date for the various provisions of the code are still to be notified. Thereafter, the other three codes, so the Industrial Relations Code Bill 2020, the Code on Social Security, and the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions, all these three were passed on the 22nd and 23rd of September and were also given assent by the president. But again, the implementation dates are yet to be notified. The draft rules have been circulated by the government in November this year, November 2020, and likely, in all likelihood, all the codes will become applicable with effect from the 1st of April 2021. So around a couple of more months to go before we see the applicability of the codes. Basically, there are all the various labor laws that were in existence till now. 40 odd different laws, they have been subsumed into these 4 major codes. So it is not that entirely this have been drafted from scratch, as we'll see. So the code on wages, the following 4 codes have been, or the laws have been subsumed into this code. The Payment of Wages Act, the Minimum Wages Act 1948, the Payment of Bonus Act 1965, and the Equal Remuneration Act 1976. So these 4 laws have been subsumed or merged, or that has resulted in the creation of the Code on Wages 2019. What this particular code does is that it regulates the payment of wages and bonus in the industry, in the trade. It provides for minimum wages that will be payable by, so for the first time what they have brought is a minimum wage which will be applicable pan-India. So that is what the code is going to provide. Again, under the different laws, not just the code on wages, but that is true for the other codes also. The different legislations or regulations provided for different definitions for wages, for the employees, for workers, workmen. There were various definitions, and that was creating a lot of confusion and litigation. So what they have done is they have simplified and given a uniform definition which is applicable for the various provisions of this particular code as well as all the other 3 codes. So that is the simplification part, the ease of doing business that is going to happen because of the new labor codes. Again, the code extends not just to the organized workers. The earlier labor regulations used to apply mainly only to the organized workforce. But now they have tried to extend the benefits and the provisions even to the unorganized workers. We'll see how that is going to happen. First, let us see what is the definition of employee. Again, as I mentioned, the definition is going to remain more or less the same across all the codes. So the word employee, the term employee means any person employed on wages by an establishment to do any skilled, semi-skilled or unskilled manual, operational, supervisory, managerial, administrative, technical or clerical work for hire or reward, whether the terms of employment be express or implied, and also includes a person declared to be an employee by the appropriate government, but does not include any members of the armed forces of the union. So the army, the military is not covered under the definition of employee under the code. Apart from that, any other person who is employed in any capacity, whether it is full-time, part-time, any kind of work, again, whether it is for some kind of reward or some other compensation, everyone is covered under the term employee. However, it does not cover apprentice. So any trainee who is registered as an apprentice is not covered under the definition of an employee under this code as well as the other codes that we are going to go through. Again, the salary threshold for supervisory work under the existing or the old regulations, there was a limit. If any person was employed in supervisory work, so he was a supervisor and his remuneration was more than 24,000 per month, then he was not considered an employee as per the Minimum Wages Act and the Payment of Bonus Act and all the different acts, and certain therefore certain benefits were not available to them. So that limit or the threshold has been removed. And also employees involved in managerial and administrative work are covered. Again, under the erstwhile regulations, the managerial and administrative people were not covered under the definitions of employees. Then let us see the definition of a worker. So a worker means any person employed in any industry to do any manual, unskilled, skilled, technical, operational, clerical, or supervisory work for hire or reward, whether the terms of employment be express or implied. So by and large, it is similar to the definition of an employee. And this is also similar to the definition as per the earlier Industrial Disputes Act. The definition excludes an apprentice, as I mentioned earlier, even for the case of employee. Similarly, for the case of worker, apprentices are not covered under the definition of a worker. It excludes employees in managerial or administrative capacity. So a manager or any person in administrative capacity will be an employee, but he will not be considered a worker. Person in supervisory capacity drawing up to 15,000 per month will be covered, and above 15,000 will not be covered. Again, he will be considered as an employee, but he will not be considered as a worker. This limit of 15,000 was earlier 10,000 rupees. So just to summarize on the wages definition, again, the definition is very long, complicated. I've just tried to put it pictorially so that it is easier. So any amount which is paid to an employee or a worker will be considered as wages if it is basic wages, dearness allowance, and retaining allowance. These are the three main components of wages. And what is not considered as wages are all other payments which are made to an employee or a worker. So examples could be statutory bonus, value of any house accommodation or other amenities, pension or provident fund, conveyance or traveling concession or allowance, defrayment of special expenses, house rent allowance, overtime allowance, commission, gratuity payment, any retrenchment and ex gratia payment. So all these different components of remuneration in the CTC will not be considered as wages. However, the most important element of the new code is that all these different elements which are not considered as wages should not be more than 50% of the total payment to the employee or the worker. So if it is more than 50%, then that particular component will also be considered as wages. So in a nutshell, what it means is that if the total CTC remuneration of an employee is suppose 30,000, then the basic dearness allowance and retaining allowance, which is the core element of wages, should be at least 50%. And if it is not 50%, then it will be deemed to be 50%, and all the remaining calculations, whether it is for PF, ESIC, everything will happen on that 50% amount. Again, this code provides for no discrimination based on the gender or any other, whether it is caste, religion, there should be no discrimination. For the same work and the same category of work or similar work, there should be no discrimination. On the minimum wages, the central government shall now fix a floor wage. So this is a new concept. Till now, the states, each state has a different minimum wage limit, and it varies very, very widely across the different states across the country. Now what is going to happen is that there is going to be one floor wage rate, which is going to be announced by the central government, and the states may have their own minimum wages, which can be at the floor wage or it can be above that. It cannot be lower that. So this is a very, very important again change. And this is going to impact the contract labor cost, the bonus payment, gratuity payment. It will have a impact on multiple different areas for many organizations. The concept of scheduled employment has been removed, and the government will prescribe a host of, just like the floor wage rate, it will also prescribe a host of other aspects which will be uniform across the country. So what they proclaim is, just like GST is one nation, one tax, Similarly, by introducing the labor codes, what they are trying to do is bring uniformity in the labor law regulations across the country, because many of the regulations were otherwise under the purview of the state governments and not under the central government. Again, the payment of wages, the mechanism for payment remains more or less the same as under the erstwhile regulations. The payment can be made in currency coin or currency notes, or by bank account or online transfers or check. In fact, they are encouraging digital and online payment. For the payment of bonus, it has to be compulsorily electronically through bank accounts. Any deduction for any fine or for say any advance was given and it has to be recouped, or for any other purpose, the deductions cannot exceed 50% of the wages. So this is now put in the code. The code applies to all establishment irrespective of number of employees, and there is no wage ceiling also. Everyone, all the employees and workers get covered under the code on wages. The payment of wages has to be made within 7 days from the end of every month. And in case of removal or retrenchment, it has to be within 2 working days from the date when the person is removed or when he resigns. So let us see the applicability and the key amendments. This is for the payment of bonus specifically. It applies to establishments where 20 or more persons are employed. The wage ceiling has not been specified currently under the code. It may be specified separately under the rules when they are announced, but in all likelihood, it will stay as it is at 21,000, which is the current limit. There will be disqualification for bonus to employees who are convicted or for sexual harassment or any other misconduct. The other key amendments are about the registers and records that have to be maintained. Now they can be maintained even electronically, which earlier it was all manual records. Even the inspector for the compliance of this, the bonus and the other aspects of the code, they will be more in the nature of a facilitator. Although they'll have power just like in the erstwhile laws, but they are supposed to guide and provide help and facilitation to the employees. Annual returns are yet to be notified in the code. Again, in the rules, they will be notified. Individual and union can file complaints for violation of code. Offenses and penalties. So one very significant aspect of this new labor codes is that all the different penalties or penal provisions have been made more rigorous. The quantum of penalties have gone up, and therefore non-compliance is going to be more and more costly. So what it says is that if there is a less payment, underpayment, then what is defined under the code on wages, the first offense, the penalty is going to be 50,000 rupees. And for repetitive offenses within 5 years, it may even lead to imprisonment up to 3 months. And fine may extend up to 1 lakh rupees, or it could be both. And contravention of any other provision, the fine could be 20,000. For repetitive offenses within 5 years, it may lead to imprisonment up to 1 month, and fine may extend up to 40,000, or it could be both. For non-maintenance or improper maintenance of documents, the fine could be up to 1,000 rupees. The various registers broadly required under the code, again, more or less, they remain the same as per the old laws, just that now it could be digital also. So form number 1, which is the register of wages, overtime, fine, deduction for damages and loss. Form 2, which is the application form. Then form 3 is for appeal. Employee register is form 4. Wage slip is 5. And 6 is application under subsection 4 of section 56 for compounding of offenses. So that was the first code, which was the code on wages. Now let us see or go to the second code, which is the Industrial Relations Code 2020. This code subsumes the Industrial Disputes Act 1947, the Trade Unions Act 1926, the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act 1946. So these 3 laws get subsumed under the new code. For the first time, they have introduced the definition of an employee also in this Industrial Relation Code. And because earlier the definition or the code dwelt only with workers, and white collar employees and managerial employees were not covered under the industrial disputes. So now they have added the definition of employee. However, they have removed the definition of a workman, and definition of worker has also been modified. Earlier, any worker who was drawing salary about 10,000 rupees was not covered under the this particular Industrial Dispute Act. Now that threshold has been increased to 18,000 rupees. So any worker who is drawing salary or wages up to 18,000 rupees per month will get covered under this particular code. The definition for employer has been completely modified, and employer now means head of department, occupier of factory, manager of factory, contractor, ultimate authority, legal representative of deceased employer. All these different categories will also be considered as an employer for the purpose of this new code. Metro railway has been included in the definition of railways. The wage definition has been revised, and it is the same as under the wage code, as we already discussed. Again, the very important aspect of this particular code is the fixed term employment. So this is a new concept which is brought into the code now. The employer can offer employment to a new employee for a fixed tenure. It could be 1 year, it could be 2 years. And at the end of the tenure, when the employment is sort of cancelled, then it will not lead to payment of retrenchment compensation. No such compensation will be required to be paid. So this is a very, very radical change in the labor regulations. The fixed term employees will be entitled to same hours of work. Wages, leave, overtime, bonus, allowances, and other benefits will be same. It will be similar to what a permanent employee gets. He'll also be eligible to all the statutory benefits. Even he'll be eligible to gratuity. But if it is a 1 year contract, the gratuity will be for 1 year. If it is a continuing contract for 2 or 3 years, the gratuity will be proportionately for 2 or 3 years. The code provides for a worker reskilling fund. So in case of an retrenchment, within 15 days from the within 45 days from the date of retrenchment, a particular amount will have to be contributed by the employer to a fund which will be managed by the government, and it will be used to reskill the workforce. And how much is this contribution? It is going to be equal to 15 days of wages last drawn by the particular worker. Then the definition of industry and the exclusions from the definition. Industry means any systematic activity carried on by cooperation between an employer and worker for the production, supply, or distribution of goods or services with a view to satisfy human wants or wishes. Any capital has been invested for the purpose of carrying on such activity, or such activities carried on with a motive to make any gain or profit. So it is a very, very wide definition, and it includes almost everything except what is specifically excluded. So it says does not include institutions owned or managed by organizations wholly or substantially engaged in any charitable, social, or philanthropic services. So any NGO will not be covered under the definition of industry. Then any activity of appropriate government relatable to the sovereign functions of the government, including all activities carried on by the different departments of the government. So that is going to be excluded. Any domestic service. Domestic service means the servants and helpers that one would use in homes. Those kind of services which are called domestic services are excluded. And any other activity as may be notified by the central government. So these are the different activities which will be excluded. Apart from that, everything else will be covered. In fact, in the earlier definition under the old law, there was no specific exclusion. But by judicial interpretation, domestic services was excluded. Otherwise, everything else was included. But now what they've done is they have given more definite shape to the definition, and NGOs, government departments have been also excluded. Discharge, dismissal, and retrenchment. So definition of industrial dispute has been modified to include disputes arising out of discharge, dismissal, retrenchment, or termination. That is the whole purpose of this particular code. Employees can raise industrial disputes with the employer within the time limit of only 2 years. Earlier, it was 3 years from the date of such dispute. Maximum number of members in the grievance redressal committee has been increased from 6 to 10 in an industrial establishment employing 20 or more workers. So there is a lot of focus which has been given to unions as well as various committees, and a lot of changes have been prescribed in the code on how exactly the unions and the committees will function. In case any worker is suspended by the employer pending investigation or inquiry for any misconduct or for any reason, in that case, the amount of subsistence allowance payable is at 50% of wages for the first 90 days of suspension and at the rate of 75% after the initial 90 days. So as I was mentioning, the code provides for a very, very formal structure for unions and how the unions can work. So 7 or more workers can form a trade union. Trade union dispute has been added for disputes between 2 or more trade unions. So if there are multiple trade unions in a particular company, then the code also provides for dispute resolution between those unions or the members of those unions. Where there is more than one trade union, the code provides for something called as a sole negotiating union. So any union which has more than 51% of employees as its member will be considered as a sole negotiating union, and only that union will negotiate with the employer for anything related to the benefit of the employees. In case any particular union does not have 51%, then a negotiating council will be created which would have representatives from the various unions in that particular company, provided they have at least 20% employees as its members. An industrial dispute can be voluntarily referred to arbitration by the employer as well as the workers. The parties to the dispute are required to execute a written agreement referring the dispute to an arbitrator. So again, this is one very welcome change. A dispute can now be referred for arbitration also, so that it does not always land up in the court of law and taking a long time. It can be resolved by the arbitration process. Matters of dispute related to trade unions will be handled by the tribunals. Then coming to the most important part, again, the strikes and lockouts. Again, there are some very, very radical changes. The code prohibits strikes or lockouts in any establishment unless a prior notice of 14 days is given. So now any flash strike is not possible. The employees straight away just going on a strike without notice is now not possible under the new code. Again, that notice has to be given. So the time period between the notice and the actual strike cannot be more than 60 days. Similar provisions existed under the Industrial Disputes Act, but only for public utility services such as railways and airlines. But the new code expands this particular provision to all industrial establishments. So this is a very, very radical change in a socialist kind of structure of labor laws in the country. This will impact the ability of workers to strike and the employers to lock out. So both ways, it requires a notice given. The layoff limit will be 90 days. Rights of workers laid off for compensation shall not apply to industrial establishments in which less than 50 workers on an average per day were employed. So for smaller industrial establishments which are employing less than 50 people, then the various rights that the workers have been given, that would not be applicable. And this 50 workers limit will not be applicable in case of establishments which are of seasonal nature. So there could be many industries which are seasonal. So there these particular provisions are not applicable. If a question arises whether an industrial establishment is of a seasonal nature or not, or whether work is performed there only intermittently, the decision of the appropriate government shall be final. Appropriate government means either the central government or the state government, as the case may be. Coming to the standing orders, the provision of standing orders on industrial establishments will be applicable to those where 300 or more workers are employed. So again, this limit, which was earlier 100, has been raised to 300. And the state governments can further increase this limit, but they cannot decrease it below 300. So this again is a very important change, because any unit which employs less than 300 people, they'll get a lot of flexibility on a lot of aspects, including for retrenchment or for setting up the time and shifts and a lot of other provisions. There will be a lot of relaxation. A fine of 1 lakh rupees, which may extend to 10 lakh, is leviable on any person who contravenes these provisions. The employer shall prepare draft standing order within a period of 6 months from the date of commencement of this code, based on the model standing orders referred to in section 29. So each industrial undertaking will have to draft their own standing orders based on the model standing order, which is published by the government. In fact, the draft of the model standing order has just been published a few days back. And as we come closer to the 1st of April, they'll issue the final standing orders. And after the code becomes applicable, within 6 months, every employer will be required to prepare their own standing orders. They can mimic the model standing order or make appropriate changes as per their own requirements. The employer shall consult on the draft standing order with the trade union. So if there is already a trade union or a recognized negotiating union or a negotiating council, then it will be discussed before the standing order is issued by the employer. So a lot of compliance requirement or the changes in the compliance requirements. So notice of change in conditions of service now will be required for 300 or more workers. A 21 days notice will be required to be given to the workers. A grievance redressal committee would be required where 20 or more workers are employed. The standing orders will be required to be prepared where 300 or more workers are employed, as we just saw. Worker committee will be required where 100 or more workers are employed. Duty of an employer to maintain muster rolls of worker is applicable for 50 or more workers. And contribution to workers reskilling fund, as we already saw, in case of retrenchment, 15 days of wages last drawn by the worker will have to be contributed to a worker reskilling fund. So this is going to be a small additional cost on the employer. So that was all about the Industrial Relations Code. Moving to the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code. Now this subsumes a whole host of regulations. Most importantly, the Factories Act 1948, the Contract Labor Regulation and Abolition Act 1970, and then various other laws which may or may not be relevant to the gems and jewelry industry, but relevant to specific industries like mines and transport workers. So this code provides for a single registration for an establishment instead of multiple registrations. There will be a centralized database, and this will lead to a lot of ease of doing business. The definition of the term factory has been changed. It specifically excludes hotels, restaurants, any eating place, electronic data processing unit, or a computer unit. Again, the threshold limits have been changed for the applicability of the laws. Earlier, 10 or more workers working with the aid of power got covered under the Factories Act. Now it is 20 or more workers working with the aid of power. And if it is without the aid of power, earlier it was 20, now it is going to be 40 people. The definition of contract labor has been modified and includes interstate migrant worker. So as we know, the migrant worker crisis was a very, very major crisis during this entire lockdown period. And therefore, the migrant workers have found special attention in the code as well. So it includes interstate migrant workers, but excludes part-time employees. Contract workers employment is governed by mutually accepted standards of conditions of employment, and he is entitled to social security benefits. So all the contract employees are also eligible to all the benefits that a permanent employee would otherwise get. The contractor can now apply for common license if he is supplying contract labor in more than one state. Earlier, again, this was a state subject, and therefore, if there was a contractor who was supplying manpower or laborers to multiple factories located in different states, he would be required to take registration in different states. Now it is a common license which will be given. Even work-specific license can be issued to contractors for specific work, subject to such conditions as may be prescribed. Again, the license will be varied for a period of 5 years. The applicability for the contract labor license would be where 50 or more contract labor are employed in any establishment, and for the manpower supply contractor also, if he is supplying more than 50 people to any factory or industrial establishment. A host of other definitions have been introduced, or a lot of definitions have been changed, whether it is employee, principal employer, manufacturing process. All these different definitions have been changed under the new code. We are not going into all of them because it would consume a lot of time, and it may or may not be so relevant. The code provides for annual leave with wages. So every worker who is employed in an establishment shall be entitled for leave in a calendar year with wages. And more or less these provisions are same or similar as per the old regulations. So it would be employees who have worked for more than 182 days in a calendar year will be eligible for the earned leaves. Those who have worked for less than 180 days will not be eligible. And the eligibility or the actual number of leaves would be 1 day of leave for every 20 days of work. In case of adolescent worker and workers employed in mines, it is 1 day for every 15 days. Any period of layoff, maternity leave or annual leave availed shall be counted for calculating the period of 180 days, but cannot be computed or counted for earning leave benefit. Any holidays that fall between the leave availed by a worker shall be excluded from period of leave. So if there is a 4-day holiday between the leave period, then those 4 days will be excluded in the number of leaves that the worker is eligible. In case where a worker service has commenced not on the first day of January, but any other day, the worker shall be entitled to leave with wages at the rate specified. So if he has worked for 1/4 of the total number of days, there are calculations which are given. But one important point to note, although it is same or similar as per the existing regulation, is that here the calculation is not on financial year basis. It is not April to March. It is January to December. So just keep that in mind. The code provides for a host of welfare provisions or welfare activities or facilities that have to be provided by an establishment. So adequate and separate washing facilities for both men and women separately. Facilities for bathing and locker rooms have to be provided. Space to store extra clothes. If there is a separate uniform which is called for, then there has to be space which has to be provided for the regular clothes. Seating arrangements for employees who are obliged to work in standing condition or position. Canteen has to be provided if 100 or more workers are there. So again, so on and so forth, there is a very exhaustive list of various facilities that have to be provided. Again, the code provides for working hours, rest day, working time. All the operational time and attendance related provisions are provided under the code. So a normal shift can be of 8 hours per day. The period of work in the 8 hours shall be so fixed so as to not exceed such hours with intervals as may be notified by appropriate government. So if there is a lunch break in between tea break, in spite of that, the total number of in and out hours, the total difference cannot be certain hours. That is going to be notified separately when the final rules are announced. The work hours for different classes of establishments and employees shall be as per the rules prescribed by the central or state government. Again, a lot of such rules are going to be prescribed going forward. The code in regard to leaves state that no employee shall work for more than 6 days a week. So there has to be a off, which has to be weekly off, that has to be provided compulsorily, except for motor transport workers. Working hours for women. Now here there is again a lot of relaxation which has been introduced by the new code, subject to the permission of the female worker. It could be she can work even in night shift, and even in hazardous processes now they can work. Registers, records and returns. So again, a host of registers and records have been prescribed. Many of them are more or less as per the old regulations. However, they can be now kept or preserved electronically. On the facilities and overall, so just a comparative of the current and the proposed provisions. So canteen, earlier it was required if 250 or more workers were employed. Now that limit is 100 workers. So any establishment having 100 or more workers, including contract workers, will need to provide a canteen facility. Shelter or restroom has to be provided now in case of 50 or more workers, which earlier was 150 workers. Crash facility has to be provided in case of 50 female workers, which earlier was 30. So the limit has gone up. For everything else, the limit has gone down. Safety officer is required now. Earlier it was 1,000 workers or more. Now in case of a normal factory, 500 workers, but factories having hazardous processes, it will be 250 workers. In case of mines, it will be 100 workers. Welfare officer will be required now in case of 250 workers. Earlier it was 500 workers. So as you see, except for crash for women workers, in most of the other cases, the requirement, the thresholds have gone down, and therefore the compliance requirements will go up. Coming to offenses and penalties. An offense which leads to the death of an employee will be punishable with an imprisonment of up to 2 years or fine up to 5 lakh rupees or both. And the government will pass on 50% of such fine as a compensation to the heirs of the victim. For any other violation, the employer will be penalized with a fine between 2 lakh and 3 lakh rupees. And where the employee violates any provisions of the code, he will be subject to a fine of 10,000. So for employee, it is 10,000. For the employer, it is 2 lakhs to 3 lakhs. Even for employees, the code lays down various rights and duties of the employees, including his own health and safety conditions. So that was about the occupational safety, health and working conditions code. The last code is the code on social security. So Social Security Code 2020. Which subsumes the Employees Compensation Act, the Employees State Insurance Act, so ESI, the Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act, the PF Act, then a host of other regulations, the employment exchanges, the maternity benefit, payment of gratuity, and other laws. So for the PF, every establishment in which 20 or more workers are employed, this code will be applicable. For ESIC, every establishment in which 10 or more employees are employed or were employed on any day during the preceding 12 months, other than a seasonal factory, the ESIC will get applicable. But in case of an establishment which has hazardous or life-threatening occupation, in that case, even one employee will trigger ESIC provisions. The gratuity provisions will be triggered where 10 or more persons are employed. Maternity benefit, again, where 10 or more persons are employed. Employees compensation will be, so subject to the provisions of second schedule, it applies to employers and employees to whom ESIC does not apply. So anyone who is covered under the ESI scheme will not be required to separately get covered under the employees compensation scheme. Otherwise, it will be covered. Social Security and cess in respect of building and construction workers. So every establishment which is covered by that definition will be covered. And Social Security for unorganized workers. So this code again for the first time introduces Social Security for the unorganized workers, the platform workers, gig workers. So whole host of people who are not really covered under the various social security networks will now get covered under this new code. So first of all, it talks about all the freelancers and workers who are working on a particular project on project based or short term work. All those, even platform working as a suppose a driver for Uber or Ola, they are called platform workers. So this code includes all this category of people also under the formal code on social security, and they'll also get all the benefits that otherwise the workers are eligible to. On the provident fund scheme, the most important change is now there is a limitation period of 5 years for initiation of any inquiry and 2 years for concluding of inquiry. Now, this is a very, very welcome change, because unlike most of the other regulations like income tax and GST or any other law, especially the taxation laws have a limitation period. The officers, the authorities cannot go back n number of years as per their requirement, and they cannot open the cases to inquire about something. There is a period. So under income tax, it is 6 years beyond the current assessment year. But under labor laws, there was no limitation period till now. And therefore, theoretically, the authorities could investigate or initiate inquiries from the date the factory or the establishment was started, even if it was 20 years back, even if it was 30 years back. But now under the PF scheme, they cannot inquire beyond 5 years. Again, the inquiries have to be concluded within 2 years. So this is a very, very welcome change under the code. Again, under the PF, now Aadhaar based registration is mandated. All establishments having 20 or more workers come under the purview of EPF. Earlier, it was applicable only to those establishments included in the under the schedule. Now the schedule employment is done away with. Everyone is covered. Systems have been designed for covering the category of self-employed or any other category. So self-employed people will also get covered under the Provident Fund scheme. The penalties have been increased from 10,000 to 1 lakh, and there is a provision for imprisonment from 1 to 3 years in case of defaults, especially if the amount is deducted from the employee's salary, but it is not deposited to the PF corpus. Subsequent failure to pay contributions attract imprisonment of 2 to 5 years and fine of 3 lakh rupees. Even self-employed people are now going to be covered under the EPF scheme. Coming to the employees' state insurance and maternity benefits. If an employer and majority of employees agree, then even voluntary registration is now allowed under the ESIC scheme. And if the particular establishment is having any hazardous processes, then even one person will trigger the applicability of ESIC. Again, currently, as we all know, ESIC scheme is applicable only in restricted areas, which are called the covered areas, where ESIC hospital is available and they are able to provide sort of medical support in that particular area. But now under the new code, all 740 districts will be covered under ESIC. Gig workers, platform workers, unorganized sectors will all be able to be linked with ESIC. If any employer fails to pay ESI contribution, even then ESI benefits will be available to the employee. So unlike under the current or the erstwhile regulation, if the employer fails to pay the contribution, then the employee will not get the benefit because no amount has been paid as a contribution. However, in the new code, the employee will continue to get the benefit and the corporation will recover the amount from the employer separately. That is a separate proceedings which will happen. ESIC voluntary registration allowed and extendable to unorganized workers. Every woman is entitled to medical bonus, which is the maternity benefit of up to 3,500 rupees, or such amount has been notified by the central government, where prenatal confinement and postnatal care is not provided by employer. Coming to gratuity. Permanent employees would be eligible for gratuity after completion of 5 years as per the current provision. So there is no change in that. For fixed term employees, as we saw now, fixed term employees are also possible. In their case, it will be for the tenure during which they are working with a single organization. So if it is a 1-year contract, they'll be eligible to the proportionate gratuity for 1 year. If they are working for 2 or 3 years in a particular single organization, they'll get gratuity for those 2 or 3 years. In that case, they need not complete 5 years to be eligible to be to gratuity. While for other employees who are not on fixed term, there the minimum period of continuous employment is 5 years as before. Then the employees compensation, and then for unorganized workers, building and construction workers, there are a few changes. Again, as we saw on the code itself, unorganized workers and platform workers and all are now covered under the scheme. The code also provides for expanding the sources of funds. So now corporates can also donate to the corpus created by the government under the CSR provisions. So they'll be able to comply with the CSR provisions by donating to the fund which is created. And out of this fund, the government will be able to provide benefits, especially to the unorganized workers and others who are not in the formal employment. Then for platforms like Uber and anyone providing a online platform through which the buyers and the sellers are meeting or service providers are meeting, they are now required to contribute between 1 and 2% of the annual turnover to a fund again, which will be used to pay the social security benefits to the platform workers. However, this will be limited to 5% of the total amount paid by that platform to those workers. So in short, we'll quickly try and summarize the key aspects of the 4 codes. As we saw, a lot of provisions still remain as it is as per the old provisions, and therefore it is not going to lead to a very material change. However, there are a few changes which may impact specific organizations, and everyone will be required to do their own gap analysis or study to see where they stand vis-a-vis the new codes, and based on that, whatever changes are required, they'll have to look into that. So the first point, there is no immediate change in the PF and ESIC coverage limits. So the current limit of 15,000 and 21,000 respectively, 15,000 for PF and 21,000 for ESIC will remain as it is, at least for the time being. But going forward, in the longer run, in all probability, the limits are going to go up. And if we currently read the thought process of the government, I think in future, maybe 5 years down the line, we don't know, but the limits are going to go away altogether. Everyone will get covered under the social security umbrella. So as we saw earlier, all the employees, irrespective of their monthly remuneration or salaries or wages, they have been covered under the different codes. So the erstwhile regulations had exempted, or many employees who were earning above a certain threshold, they were not covered by those regulations, but the new codes have covered everyone. And that is how for the social security umbrella also, I believe going forward, everyone will be covered irrespective of the monetary amount. And therefore, organizations will have to start preparing first for the increase in the threshold, and going forward, even if there is no threshold, how they are going to cope up, because their costs of PF and ESIC will go up. Second, there is now a uniform and clear definition of wages. So this is going to save a lot of litigation, lot of time and energy which is spent on litigation. Provision for single registration for factories and contract labor, as well as single registration for contractors having multiple locations. So again, this is going to ease doing business. Thresholds for canteen and other facilities are reduced, and organizations would have to create such facilities. Limitation period under EPF, which is introduced now, having 5 years as a limitation period and 2 years to conclude the inquiries, which is going to help a lot of organizations. They'll be able to close the old cases faster. Unorganized and self-employed and gig workers and platform workers now covered under social security. Employers having less than 10 employees can voluntarily opt for ESIC scheme, and ESIC is going to be applicable in all the 740 districts. The new definition of wages, where the basic and DA should be at least 50% of the total gross remuneration. Now, this is going to have a lot of monetary impact on the liability to PF contribution, gratuity, bonus, everything. Because in a lot of organizations that I see, the basic and DA is not 50%. It is less than that. Typically, it is in the range of 20 to 30%. So with the increase in this threshold, the related contributions and the expenses are going to go up. Social security for platform worker also, and platform companies to contribute 1 to 2% to a fund, which is going to increase their cost of operation. Fixed term employment is legalized, and this is going to be a very, very major change on how the new sort of workers and employees are given employment. In all probability, companies will give a fixed term employment instead of an open-ended appointment. Fixed term employees will still be eligible for gratuity on original rate basis, even if they don't complete 5 years. So proportionately, if it is 1 year, then related to 1 year. If it is 2 years, then accordingly. Standing order and prior permission for retrenchment now required only for firms with 300 plus employees. So again, this is a major relaxation. A lot of other regulations will also be relaxed for companies who are MSMEs, who are employing less than 300 people. Flash strikes are now prohibited. So minimum 14 days of notice is now required before a strike. Again, this is a very, very welcome change, and this is going to really help a lot of businesses in certain states where the occurrence of such strikes are higher. Reduction in number of returns and registers, as well as now you can maintain those registers and records electronically also. Increased penalties for non-compliance. So as we saw, in most cases, the penalties have been increased almost tenfold, as well as there are provisions for imprisonment and all. And therefore, non-compliance is going to be more and more costly as we go along. Before I conclude, just one small slide on about us, about RSM India. Already Mr. Sen was gracious enough in his introduction. He has already mentioned about this, but very quickly. So RSM Astute Consultech, which is part of RSM India. RSM India is the 6th largest accounting consulting group in India, with 11 offices in almost all the major cities of India. So Mumbai, Surat, Ahmedabad, New Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, everywhere. The total team is around 1,750 people, including chartered accountants, MBAs, labor law and HR professionals, engineers. And we are part of RSM International, which is the 6th largest accounting consulting group worldwide. The service offerings include taxation, audits, corporate and labor laws, HR consulting, operations consulting, technology solutions, software and all, financial advisory, and financial process outsourcing. Within the HR space, the services include labor law advisory, contract labor compliances, recruitment services, organization development, coaching, HR audits. On the technology side, we provide HR softwares, mobile app for employees, payroll software, online assessment solution, learning management software, compliance tracking software, and robotic process automation bots. If there is any question, so we'll just now move on to the question answer session. But if time does not permit, and if we are not able to give full justice to all the questions, you can just note down my number and email ID. You can always reach me on WhatsApp or email, and I'll be glad to respond to any query that you may have. With this, I conclude my session. Thank you for the time and attention that all of you have given. Thank you, GJEPC and Mr. Sen, Rashmi ji, and entire GJEPC team for giving me this opportunity. With everyone's kind permission, I'll remove the screen share so that we can just go to the chat box and I can start answering the questions.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Nirav ji. It's been a very informative session. Wonderful. So many changes, and a lot of things are about it's good for the society, good for the citizens, good for the employees, and compliances have gone up. But there are a lot of relaxations given to the companies as well. So it's a very balanced change, I think, that has happened. So now coming to the questions, Neeravji, there is one question which says that reskilling fund applicability, which you said for those 1 year or fixed time employees, that once they are taken, then once they are discontinued, there is this fund that has to be given. So how does it work? So there is a question on that. And post that, there is a question for minimum wages by Mr. Neville, which says that since minimum wages are different in different states now, will floor wages scheme change the minimum wages as like change in Maharashtra, change in Gujarat, or is it going to be, it must be the highest of all states? Like, so what's the answer to that? And connecting to that, he has also asked that these laws are applicable to fixed employees or contractual workers also. So we have three questions with us. One is reskilling fund, one is on the minimum wages across the various states, and one is the applicable of that to fixed employees or contractual workers.
Fair. So I'll answer one by one. So first is about the reskilling fund. So I'll just explain first the concept. What is basically a reskilling fund? So what the government has felt is that when there is mass retrenchment that happens, the core reason for that could be that the workers are not relevant to the new kinds of jobs that are coming up. And if they are to be re-employed in that same company or in some other company, they'll have to acquire some new skill sets. And in order to fund the training needs of such people who have lost jobs, they have put the responsibility on the employer who is retrenching those workers to contribute certain amount to the fund. And it is 15 days of wages of that particular person. The 15 days of wages last drawn by that person who is retrenched, who has lost the job. It will be contributed by that employer to a common fund of the government. And then the government will use that fund for reskilling of not that just one worker. It is a common fund which is for reskilling all the workers. So it is not limited, this aspect is not limited to fixed term employees. It is relevant to any employee who is retrenched by your organization. In that case, the cost to organization for the retrenchment will go up because they'll have to contribute this to this fund also. Hope that answers that question.
Yes, I think so. I think so.
Okay. Moving to the second, third, 2-3 questions which are related to the minimum wages. So yes, the minimum wages in the state of Maharashtra are probably the highest across the different states. When the central government comes up with the floor wage rate, which is still to be announced, so it is still not announced. But when they do that, I think they are going to first analyze the minimum wage rates prevalent in the different states. Maybe they may come up with the average of that particular rate or any other amount that they think that is fair and should be the minimum floor rate. So it will be in all probability lower than the minimum wages in Maharashtra. However, as I had explained, it does not mean that Maharashtra will have to reduce the minimum wage rate to the national rate. What it means that any state where the minimum wage rate is currently lower than the new rate which is notified by the government, that particular state will have to increase their minimum wage rate to the minimum floor rate that is fixed by the government. So in Maharashtra, the impact will be almost non-existent because there may not be a change that is required, but in a lot of other states, there could be some change that will be triggered by this.
Neeravji, there is that other question connected to that, which says that are the laws applicable for fixed or for contractual workers also?
Yes, so it is going to be for everyone. The floor rate of wages will be applicable as minimum wages for permanent employees as well as temporary as well as contract employees. For everyone, that will be the floor rate.
Okay, so a new person we recruit should be minimum wage rate, and
Yes.
the old person who is below the wage rate then they will automatically, we have to raise their wage rate.
Yes.
That is how we need to deal with it.
Yes.
Okay, there was a question in the chat box which Mr. Vishad Jariwala was asking, but what is the meaning of standing order? Standing order, where was it? I might have missed out on that.
Yeah. So standing orders is like a rules and regulations for a company, and everything right from the timing, minimum timing, and when will be the break, and when there will be a leave, and how leaves can be availed, the various do's and don'ts, the code of conduct, all those internal rules and regulations that the companies may have to be in a format which is as near to the standing order. So standing order is like a model set of rules and regulations, and the companies can use that standard framework to create their own rules and regulations. Whatever flexibility is provided under the standing orders as well as the codes, they can use those flexibilities, but they cannot go beyond that. So when it says that you need to give a weekly off after every 6 days, then you cannot write in the internal regulation that you will make them work for 14 days without a leave. You will have to give a leave after every 6 days. But you may write that, okay, we'll give leave on a rotational basis. So certain employees will be given leave or weekly off on Sunday. Some other employees will be given weekly off on Monday. And that way, on a rotational basis, we will provide leave or weekly off to the employees. That is something which you can write in the regulations, and that is the standing order that you have to get. So the union or the employees council has to approve that, and then it has to be certified and submitted to the relevant authority.
Okay, thank you. There is this other question. Is there a standard for hourly wage rate as we have for monthly minimum wages? So does the hourly wage rate also change?
Yes. So normally when they'll announce the wage rate, the floor rate, they'll announce it on an hourly rate basis, and then it has to be multiplied to come to the monthly wage rate.
Oh, okay. So whatever is the you divide it by number of days and you divide it by number of 8 hours, and then that is how the hourly wage rate will be calculated.
Yes. Yes.
And okay, there is another question which says that, is there a law for penalizing workers for vandalizing the property if there is any dispute?
Yes, so not just the new labor codes, these provisions are there even in the existing Industrial Disputes Act and the existing provisions. So if there is any worker who is found guilty by an internal inquiry for vandalizing company's property or doing any or for any other misconduct, then the company can suspend him, and during the suspension, only a certain amount of wages have to be paid. It can terminate the employment of the person. In that case, it will not be required to pay gratuity. Even bonus can be cancelled, so one can withhold the bonus, or one will not pay the bonus. So that way they'll be able to take action against the employee. However, suppose there is a loss of a few lakhs which is caused by the employee, the company cannot recover the entire loss from him straight away. So it can be a criminal case which can be filed, and the person can be put behind the bars, and one will not pay the gratuity and bonus and other such amounts that are normally payable. But you cannot get the entire amount back through recovery proceedings from that employee. And this provisions remain the same in the new code as well.
Okay. Nirav ji, there is a question, two questions, same kind of a question, that when is the applicability of the code? One person has asked, and another person has asked that, are we expecting any change retrospective from 2020 if the code is notified in 2022? So has it begun, the applicability of all the codes?
So all the codes have become law. So they have been passed by the parliament, and the president has also given his assent. So now the codes are laws. However, all the laws, when we say laws, it is basically an act. Then there are rules which make the act practically implementable. So the applicability date has still not been announced. And as I mentioned in my presentation, in all likelihood, it is going to be applicable from the 1st of April 21. Again, about the retrospective nature of the rules, in most of the cases, there could be some exceptional element in the code which may have retrospective applicability, but otherwise it will have prospective applicability from the 1st of April 21 or the date that is notified. It will not be retrospective.
Okay. And another question is that, has the Supreme Court judgment been passed for lockdown wages? What one should pay their employees during the lockdown period? Is there any?
Okay, this is an entire subject in itself. I had a series of webinars, long webinars on this subject, but just to quickly give an answer on this, the Supreme Court has not given the final verdict. It has given an interim judgment. And as per the interim judgment, it has tried to encourage the employers and the employees to sit across the table and decide between themselves what they want to do. And it has encouraged the state government and the state authorities to facilitate negotiations between the employers and employees to close this amicably. So that is the interim judgment. Thereafter, there is no final judgment that has been given. Now, what should be paid by an employer and how it should be paid is a matter between the employer and employees. But we have given some views on this, and if anyone wants, probably we have a recorded version of that session where the legal aspects have been analyzed, and we have tried to opine as to how it should be done. So I can share that link separately, because otherwise it is going to be a long answer to explain that.
Yes. No, I think people are extremely excited, and there are a lot of questions coming. Niravji, if you still have time, can we take a few more questions?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, thank you very much. So there are 3 questions here. What about the payment of 15% of all remuneration in wages under Code on Wages? So that is a question that has been asked. Another question is that, does the new code substitute shop and establishment code? And the third question is, what action can be taken to an employee who is found committing theft? And at the fourth question was, what is minimum term for the FTE, fixed term employee? So I think that was 1 year you had said, no? The minimum term, or can it be 6 months?
So there is no specific provision. Typically, it would be 1 year, because if it is less than 1 year, then it is in fact a temporary or a casual or a part-time job or a project-based work. It is not in fact an employment at all. Normally, because whether it is a provision about the leaves, gratuity, everything get triggered at least if 1 year has passed. So in that context, one can say that a fixed term employment is a 1 year minimum, but as such, there is no such provision which restricts it to a specific term.
Okay.
Coming to the Shop and Establishment. So technically, Shop and Establishment Act is a state act. Each state would have its own Shop and Establishment Act. So what happens now is that whatever is mentioned in the labor codes, because they extend to shops also, and therefore that becomes the minimum standards for everything. The state governments can still have their own laws which have to be in compliant with the national labor codes, as just like what we discussed about the minimum wages, that they can have a higher minimum wage, they cannot go below that. Similarly, for all the other provision, whether it is about the timing, whether it is about the leaves, whatever they come up, they can have separate laws for the particular state, but they have to be above, or they have to be more beneficial to the employees compared to the national labor code. It cannot be below that.
Okay. There was a question on employee found committing theft, and another question on 15% of all remuneration in wages under Code on Wages.
So about the theft, I think the answer that I gave earlier about vandalizing the property of the company, the same answer applies here. So the company can suspend the person, initiate an inquiry against him. During the period when the inquiry is going on, it only needs to pay subsistence allowance, which is 50% of the wages, which means it has to be 25% of the total, in case 50% is the other allowances and 50% is basic DA. So out of the total, 25% has to be paid. And the company, if he's found guilty, then the company can terminate him. There is no need to pay retrenchment compensation, no need to pay gratuity, no need to pay bonus. So company will not pay him anything, and can file a criminal case and put him behind bars. But and if that property is still with that person, the company can recover the property which was stolen. But if it is not available, not existent, he has sold it and he has siphoned out the money, then company will not be able to claim it. But otherwise, so it is a separate criminal procedure which will happen.
The other one was on 15% of wages.
So I did not really understand that question, because it is not 15%, it is 50. So out of the total amount that one pays, the basic and DA has to be 50% of the wages. I'm not sure in what context is that 15% question that was asked. I assume it is the 50% one that I'm talking.
Yes, so basically basic DA and one more component you said,
Retaining allowance.
Retaining allowance should add up to 50% of the total salary or wages or whatever you call it being paid to the employee. And
Yes.
the PF or the has to be calculated on which
That
amount?
50%.
That 50%, not on the rest 50%.
No. So for ESIC, it is on the entire amount excluding certain things, but PF and gratuity is on the 50% or higher. So if someone has basic and DA as 70%, then it is on 70%. But if it is less than 50, then he has to pay on 50%.
And so the employer and an employee, both the sides, PF will be on the 50%. So the in hand can go up and all of those things can happen. Yes. Okay. Great. I think that we have covered most of the questions. I'm very, very happy to see a lot of active participation from all the audience. And I'm sure that, a lot of doubts have been cleared. And as Niravji said, that if there are any more doubts, he will be happy to help you. And he has shared his email address and his mobile number. And thank you, Niravji. I think it was a wonderful session, very knowledgeable, and let's hope for the best and let us take care of our employees. All I can say is that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
again.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone, and have a very good evening to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Sen. Thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you, Rashmi ji. It was a very good session. Thank you for organizing it for all the members. Thank you.
And